Stephanie Medley, and I am the chair of this committee. We have quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started. And Monique, if you could do a roll call, please.
Yes, Stephanie? I'll come back to you, Stephanie. Tina?
Present.
Can you all hear me?
I just started hearing you, but
Oh, okay, so I'll go with you, Stephanie, go ahead and,
here.
Okay, Tina,
Present.
Brandon,
Here.
Simon,
I'm here. Thank you.
and Cheryl.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all board members are present. Would you like me to share my screen with the agenda, Stephanie? You're on mute, Stephanie.
Sorry, the internet does not like me today. No, I think we're fine. Thank you, Monique.
Okay. And I did put the agenda in the chat.
Yes. Okay, yeah, everything is just moving really slow on my computer today. Like I said, welcome everyone. We'll open it up for public comment for anything that is not on the agenda. Any public comment or any updates? All right, CNN, we'll move on. And first up is approval of the record of action from our meeting on July 21st. And I'll open it up to the committee if there are any comments, questions, or corrections that need to happen with that. And I'll open it up to the public for any comments or corrections. Seeing none, we'll open it for a motion to approve the record of action from July. Can I get a motion from what?
Stephanie, I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Thank you, Simon. And can I get a second, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Cheryl. And can we do a roll call vote, please, Monique?
Yes, Stephanie,
Yes.
Tina, I'll come back. Go ahead,
Did you hear
Tina.
me? Yes.
Yes. Okay, Brandon,
Yes.
Simon,
Yes.
and Cheryl.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And I do want to say welcome to Tina and Brandon. I know you all are new to the meetings. I think, Brandon, you may have come to a couple of them, but.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Tina. Okay, next up, we wanted to do a discussion and quick update on our work plan objective 5, which was around school discipline. For those of you that are new to this conversation, we've talked about intervention and prevention services and school to prison pipeline, and what does our work look like to do some work around those things. And so we've had presentations from LaShante Smith, who is the Director of School Climate and Social Emotional Learning for West Contra Costa School District. And we've talked about doing listening sessions with West County young people around this work. And so LaShante and I did have a chance to connect. And one of the things that we talked about is developing a timeline for this work and kind of a work plan for what it looks like to do some of the outreach that we need to get young people to participate, and also to get the adult ally support that we need for this, which would include some of the members from our job to participate in it. So at the moment, we're working on that timeline, working on a work plan for that and what the inquiry process will look like. And the goal is to hopefully actually start the inquiry process early next year. Any questions or comments from anyone from the committee?
I'll just remind everybody, if you were one of the several people that Cheryl volunteered to come to the schools, just be looking for your invite, to do that at some point in the future.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Cheryl, for volunteering with us. Is there anything else, Chris? I don't think I missed anything.
As far as this item, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. I'll open it up to the public for any questions or comments around this. Okay, seeing none, we will move on. And next is around, we have been talking about diversion criteria, the criteria that Simon worked on, and I think Michael, I don't know if there was anybody else that was working on that. But we developed a
You
list.
gotta give full credit to Christopher. Chris sitting quiet over there.
But we have that list of criteria for diversion. But one of the things that came up in, I think about 2 meetings ago, was around how does that actually kind of correlate with some of the data that we've been finding. And Chris, if you don't mind, I'll actually turn it over to you. But thinking about how do we actually collect the data, because I think even in the data subcommittee, there's been some problems with collecting certain data. And so really starting to brainstorm and think about how do we actually want to approach that to ensure that this list that we'll ultimately recommend, it meets the needs of reducing racial and ethnic disparities in the county. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, you didn't have to reiterate her first time. But yeah, I would say, first of all, again, I want to commend this group because I wasn't able to attend the meeting in question and hadn't even thought about, sort of looking at data to figure out what the impacts would be of, including certain offense types on this list of excluded, offenses from diversion consideration and all of that. That's the right thing to do. The problem has been, right, that we are limited right now in the data that we have, particularly data that we have access to and are able to analyze in a way that yields a report that gives us some insights or some analysis along the lines of what was being asked for. So what we wanted to try to do today is to think a little bit about, where are some places that we might look outside of the direct asks and all of that work that we've been doing as a body, as a whole for over a year now, right? Going directly to agencies and saying, can you please give us this data disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender, geography, offense, so that we can see, where the trends are, what we need to know. And, they've been saying, yes, but, or no, very politely, right? That's basically been the response. Or we have some, but who's going to analyze it, right? Like where does the analysis get done? So those have been sort of the 3 responses that we've had up to this point. And we're looking to just brainstorm some about where else we might go outside of those direct agencies. Where are, there are reports potentially that, would have some of this data, on an ongoing basis, or at least, within a relatively recent time frame that might be relevant or useful. What about DOJ statistics, and reporting, like how could that be utilized or leveraged to, get at the answers to some of the questions that we have. And in addition to that, those types of examples that have already been floated, I'm curious about any other space that we might look to, that, any other organization that we might partner with, if there's something coming out of, I don't know, like a local educational institution or something that might be doing, some sort of report or whatever the case may be, just not wanting to sit back and accept no for an answer. Before I stop belaboring the point, I'll just say also that, it's okay if we don't have like all the answers, or if we don't have the most amazing and phenomenal thoughts here. We do have a data subcommittee, and they haven't met in a while. But hopefully next month they will meet. And this is definitely something that we can talk about with them. I would just hope to maybe throw some ideas their way from the conversations that we've had, to say, maybe what do you guys think about looking in some of these areas? And in addition to this, what other places have we missed that we might need to consider? So that's sort of the conversation we want to have. And we are open to any and all suggestions about how to get information about who's being impacted by, the offenses that we have listed, and thus, whether or not the list makes sense, in terms of what its racial impact will be if it is, moved forward as currently constructed, or if it needs to change. That being said, I'll leave it with an actual call to action, and that is, are there any ideas about, what alternative data sources we might be able to use for that purpose?
Hey, Chris, why don't I start with a little bit of good news, just to see things as glass half full, which may be of some help. As you're aware, DA Becton has been wanting to have a comprehensive data portal or outward-facing dashboard that our office can provide. So this sort of specific questions can be asked into that sort of the machine, right? We could plug in specific demographic, whether that's age or race, geographically. This is all sort of the pipe dream of if you could have a perfect dashboard, what would this look like, right? And then say, all right, this type of offense could be a general offense, or it could be a specific penal code section, and over this time frame, produce the aggregate of what that looks like. We have kind of been on 3 different tracks because there's no one perfect product out there. One that we have recently engaged with over the last 3 months is Measures for Justice, who many of you may be familiar with. Yolo County has a dashboard, not perfect, not necessarily what we would be looking for, but it does do some statistical things. Last month, we had a team from our office who did a preliminary questionnaire on how we track cases, how we utilize our case management system. And that's sort of a preliminary aspect to this, in the sense that they'll report back to us on where are our shortcomings. A lot of our data entry comes from information that comes in from an agency and then comes back to us from the courts. And then there is user input on our end by a line deputy to input certain information that isn't captured from either what data comes in from the law enforcement agency or from the back end from the court. We know there are shortcomings in that, and kind of in that space, we kind of call that dirty data, in that somebody either changed the charges to make sure it was the correct charge being filed, but then has now changed what the initial charge was. Let me give you an example, right? If a case came in as grand theft, and then the prosecutor knows that reading the police report is actually theft of an automobile, they then delete the preliminary charge of grand theft and change it to what they perceive to be the correct one, auto theft. That then augments the statistical capture of how many cases came in for auto theft and how many got filed, right? And so that's an example of sort of dirty data. We're going to learn from measures for justice where our shortcomings and areas of opportunity lie. And so in Q1, we anticipate that we're going to be kind of moving forward there. For a significant period of time now, we've been talking with another group, Peregrine, that is going to be able to do some more real-time data analysis for us, both on crime trends as well as potentially, though not in the area of statistical data, more kind of live, where are we in a case, where that's going. So I think that at least from the perspective of my office, we are finally going to be able to say, like, we now have a way to gauge some of this metric. There are challenges that comes with who owns that information, whether it's the court and how the court feels about certain data being utilized, or if that initiates from the police department and the likes. All that bureaucratic red tape is what it is, and we'll continue to work through that. But I think there is some promise on the horizon for where we can say substantively, at least from the DA's office, we're going to be able to have something which is outward facing and a community member, this group and subcommittees, and anybody else who's inclined to know can start doing some of that work. I would, and I'll add to the conversation to say this, because I think it's an interesting point of discussion. Just in the spaces that I've been working in, I have seen quite surprisingly that when there is a reduction in the filing of criminal cases, there is an expansion in the racial disproportionality of the cases which were then prosecuted. As a DA, I was caught off guard and surprised to see that, to say that, okay, so the harder we work to find alternatives to incarceration and alternatives to prosecution, the greater the racial inequities become. I just throw that out here now because it's something that I'm struggling with on an individual level and on a systems level, as to you're trying to do good for all, and it creates actually a further divide in justice. So just a couple things at the front of my mind there, Chris. Didn't mean to create a filibuster here, because I know you're looking for some tangibles as to where else data could come from, but I'm offering up hope that the DA's office is going to have something Q1.
Simon, a couple of questions. Did you say that the dashboard was going to be public?
Yeah, so we would have, again, sort of like in the dream world of how these clouds operate, there would be an outward facing dashboard in which then one could go in there and, with pull downs and say, I want these crimes, this age group, this racial demographic over this period of time, what's that aggregate look like?
And then to your last point, I think that's why it's important that, we're looking at the data and, we had that conversation. I think Cheryl was the one that brought it up. But just looking at, which offenses are people being convicted of or charged with. So I'm wondering, to your last point, do you have an idea of like what charges were actually coming up and we're seeing that disparity?
No, Stephanie, I'm just talking about in general.
Okay.
That, in discussions with some other offices who are a little further along in this space, it's one of the downsides that they found for them to go back and say that, okay, let's take another look at this, and how do we offset this racial inequality that's coming about when we say let's not charge this offense. and everyone agrees that a reduction in the system is a good thing overall. But if that increases that inequity, that's adverse, and that's not what the intention is behind it. I saw that Melvin had a question about real time. Melvin, it has to be somewhat static in that, it would probably be available each month to say like, all right, from this capture date, because it requires updating of those cases, both from the court as well as from our office and from the law enforcement agency. But it wouldn't be something to say like, hey, we can only show up to 2019, right? It would be at least updated, whether that's quarterly, monthly. That's way beyond where I am on this, but fair question.
I also believe the DA's office was partnering with Vera Institute on gathering some data. And eventually, I think the goal was to come out with a report on that data. Do you know where that is? Is that still happening?
Yeah, so that's the third one in this sort of triple-headed attempt at this: Measures for Justice, Paradigm, and Vera. Dinah and I were actually just on a call with Vera earlier this week, getting an update from them as to where they are. They're coming to their end of their time with us and would like to have a presentation. Actually, Dinah and I talked to them about getting together with either this board as a whole or presenting to the subcommittees as well as internally to our office. And so that's something that we're looking forward to seeing what they have and they're able to share as well. From the conversations we've had from them, there's is a targeted approach to specific types of crime, as opposed to, hey, this is everything, and then it's something that an individual can then work with to say like, hey, here's the data. They're sort of focused on, all right, where are some policy areas for reform, and then kind of building backwards on where that policy reform may be. What are those types of crimes, and what does that look like? But that should be something that is done by the end of the calendar year for us.
Thank you. Jill?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much, Simon. That sounds super exciting. And I think it just feeds right into the whole discussion I think that our JOB has had for so long, which is collecting all points, all data points throughout the system, because, you're recognizing this in your system, and it's kind of like, how does that tie into the other data points in the other systems? So it'll be super exciting when we do finally reach a point where we're able to collect data from each one of the systems in the criminal justice system to kind of lay it out as a fabric. Super interesting. Thanks so much.
We can't all go on mute. I will also echo that and say I appreciate the work that's being done in that office, and we'll be looking forward to to what comes of that. And I'll just add, so two things. First, there is no perfect dashboard. The goal is to continue to refine it, right? It's just like the work that we've done, say with probation, right? Melvin can tell you, like, every time they send us anything and we look at these charts and tables and we're like, oh, and now we want to know this, and now we want to know that, and what about that, and can we get data on this, right? That's just kind of what's going to happen. So over time, it'll get refined. You'll figure out, the more it kind of is viewed by the public, what questions they might have, or what things, they might, what features they might, find helpful in terms of sort of reading it more clearly and making sure that they're taking away the right things from it, all that sort of stuff. So it's all iterative, and that's fine. That's part of the process. As long as everybody knows that, it's like, hey, we're doing the best that we can to put this out, and then we can take it from here and kind of figure out where to go. And that's not all gonna happen overnight, but over time it'll get better and get more useful. Then I think that's sort of what that work is like. And I will also say, just in our experience as an organization, that is true everywhere, right? That a lot of times when people start to see, policy and practice changes in action, that what happens is, your overall incarceration numbers may be reduced, but disparities may increase. And usually for us, that's an indication that we sought to create sort of a one-size-fits-all solution, as opposed to saying, okay, how do we reduce or how do we change outcomes for this population that is overrepresented? And then targeting that way and figuring out, is there a low-lying fruit offense here that we feel comfortable working with that would really impact, the way these numbers look for this particular population? Is there, an organization that we should particularly be partnering with that, has the trust and the infrastructure to serve this particular population in a way that would make an impact? Those sorts of questions, right, in this really targeted way, are what make the difference in terms of those types of reductions. And I don't even know how many times I've said that in how many jurisdictions, because it's true everywhere and we see it all the time.
Thanks, Chris.
Any other questions, comments, ideas? Chris, so the data committee, they were able to get some data. Is that the data that they received from probation? And was it probation only?
So they get some data from the sheriff's office too. But that data, so I think, so I know for a fact that, the data that we get from the sheriff's office, you just kind of get the raw chart, right? So it's hard to, to derive trends from that, to say, oh, like this many people this month or this quarter, were charged with this type of offense, and they're all in this particular city. And so we have sort of an issue going on in this city around, this type of offense or this type of, need, or we may need this type of intervention, which is why we want that information, right? Basically the way that we get that information, which the sheriff's office is providing, doesn't allow for, or at least it doesn't come in that format. It comes in a raw format. And my understanding has been that the sheriff's office would prefer, or, basically will only share that raw data in a manipulable form where it could be, worked into a spreadsheet or taken from there, with an agency within the county. That's who they are comfortable with sharing it with, whereas the Burns Institute is not technically in Contra Costa County. We are in Oakland, right? So not far away, mind you, but we do have the capacity to do data analysis. That is something that I think the sheriff's office to this point has been pretty clear that they're not comfortable doing, or not comfortable at least having us do. And so we've respected that. But what I will say is that we have had in the past and are trying to update our own data map, that people can literally, you can click on a state, you can search the counties, and find basically all of your youth and adults data, and then you can filter out for which population you want, so on and so forth. And I think we are just, from my understanding, because that I don't do that, right? I don't do the data stuff. You know, I went to law school because I do not math, and I think everybody else who is on this call who did, you understand we don't math. That's why we're language people and stuff, and history and all that. And then we went to law school and we went from there. So for the folks who are working on that, my understanding is that they are trying to develop data agreements and jump through hoops, as it were, you know, for the DOJ to be comfortable with releasing that information to them again and updating it and so on and so forth. And a lot of questions about who's going to have access to it and for what purpose and so on and so forth. So that's a process. It's been a long time coming. I really hope it's up soon, because it would be really, really helpful if we could just use that. And we could probably look at a lot of these things just based on, you know, the DOJ information that's there. But, you know, in this way that is sort of more insight and analysis driven than just like there's some information there and we don't know necessarily what it means, or we have to infer from there.
Jill, I think I saw your hand. Go back up.
Yeah, I would just add to everything that Chris just said that, you know, in addition to that, the sheriff is not the only law enforcement agency in Contra Costa County. And so there is agreement from the other cities who have their own police departments in Contra Costa County to share data, but the problem is there's nowhere to share it to at this point. However, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice is bringing their, the community planning process is bringing their report to the Board of Supervisors next week on the 25th. And so the Board of Supervisors will be making a decision on how to form that office so that we can move forward and hopefully land this racial justice oversight body within that office so that we can have the analysts that we need to do all this work.
Thank you, Jill. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I think another thing that we have talked about is that we need to start creating a list specifically for youth. And so, Simon, that is one thing that I would like to talk a little bit more with you, as well as, and Brandon, you could probably be in this discussion as well. And maybe bringing in Michelle as well, but at least starting to think about what that initial list could look like, especially how it relates to current programs that are already happening in the county, and potential programs that happen in the county.
Sounds good, Stephanie. Yeah, we definitely like to get Michelle involved with that. That would be great.
Okay, well, I'll open it up one more time, see if anybody else has anything to add to this conversation, any ideas? And if not, so next steps, we do have a lot of next steps around our objective 5, and hopefully we can come back kind of with a plan of an implementation plan of what that looks like and what we would be asking of this committee, and also getting your ideas on like how you would want to participate in this. And then I don't know if we'll be able to get a meeting around some of the diversion criteria, but we'll hopefully try to get a meeting before the end of the year, I hope. But this year is winding down very quickly, and I know with the holidays coming up, it's gonna be tough to get folks together. But we'll see what we can do. So our next meeting is set for November 17th. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.